Well, howdy, everyone, and thank you again for joining us with our PPDM podcast series on why data management is still important. Today, we are actually doing podcast 6. I can't believe we're already to number 6. It's been a fun ride so far, and today's topic is gonna be a really interesting one, if not a bit of a tongue twister. We've spent a lot of our previous discussion focusing on the various aspects of data management. And along the way, we've also talked about technology, software, information systems, and the like. However, there's still a big elephant in the room that we haven't talked about, and that is the broader idea of digitization or digitalization. So here, this tongue twisters come already within the energy organizations. We've got a diversity of what that digitalization term means. From the staff of standpoint of you've got terminology mixes around the ideas of digitalization, digitization, datafication, digital engineering, data engineering, digital transformation, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And it's constraining the effective deployment of sound data management principles in our companies. It's sort of like having a big bowl into which all these digital ideas and things digital have been tossed to create a sort of chopped salad. So in our discussion today, we wanted to parse out what some of these terms really mean, and hopefully we can clear up some of the confusion that has been building over the last few years. So once again, I want to welcome our three wise guys. Gentlemen, thank you once again for being here. And actually, Tim, I want to see if you wanted to start us off today on your thoughts around this.
Sure. So, Jim is really our expert here. He's written a lot on this in the past, and so he's going to chime in, I'm sure, and John's going to chime in as well. We've all kind of been involved in this over the years, and we've seen this sort of lexicon of language build up and confuse us in some ways. And our industry itself even is a little bit confused at times. In fact, in 2017, the International Energy Agency published a pretty big volume of work titled Digitalization and Energy, in which it attempted to tackle what digitalization is and how it's operationalized. So the IEA described digitalization as the growing application of information and communications technologies across the economy, not just energy, but all economy. Still, I really don't think that even hits the mark very well. And I would personally define digitalization more along the lines of an environment or framework in which energy organizations leverage and exploit data, information, analytics, information systems, and technology to transition towards a greater operational efficiency. That's how I would sort of describe it. So digitalization really is an organizational process or a paradigm shift in this sense that takes full advantage of the benefits that can accrue and have accrued from the rapid evolution of computational and information technology. It's really a change in business model that's evidence-driven, relying on data and computing and technology really to add to the bottom line. Now, even with all of that, there's a lot to unpack in that definition there. But you can kind of see where we're going with this discussion. We start out with the idea of digitalization, and that'll get us going into some other ideas, and perhaps somebody else will chime in here.
Well, this is John. I guess my two colleagues here are probably more adept at some of this than I am, but we've been moving towards a digitalization of the oil and gas industry for a long time. I mean, this is not an overnight process. I mean, it's lengthy. And even in the oil field, where you see a lot of the trying to convert a lot of the oil fields into digital data sources, it's not always successful. And to be honest with you, not even practical. A lot of the fields, because of their age and because of the revenue that's generated from them, it's not cost effective to even tie them in. So I think, we talk about getting there to a fully digitized oil field. And we're working, we're getting there, but the fact is that it's going to be a long time. Part of me is even going to be surprised if we make it by the time the oil industry is put to bed.
Well, and you said something really interesting there, John. So Tim talked about and I think did a pretty good job of characterizing what digitalization, is, and you just said, John, you talked about digitization. So we have digitalization, and then we've got digitization. And so what's the difference? How is digitization different from digitalization or digitalization? See, tongue twisters. Here they go.
Well,
So I'll
Matt,
jump back in there.
I think part of that is it depends on how old you are.
Yeah.
So Matt, let me try to answer your question with an analogy that we probably all run into, and it's one that frustrates me. And that, just say my healthcare. For the last in the United States, there was a law passed a number of years ago to encourage healthcare systems to become digital, and everybody, kind of got on board, or just about everybody got on board. You'll have run into a few old doctors our age that still doesn't like to fill out all the forms on his new iPad, but most of it has moved towards capturing as much information as possible. And to John's point, not everything's practical to capture this way, but they're often, we go into the doctor's office, we fill out the forms on an iPad. The nurse or the receptionist, asks us a few questions about insurance, and that goes into the digital system. We get on there, and all our information about our height, weight, et cetera, is captured digitally. And then we get into the room, and the doctor comes in. First, the nurse comes in, and she's got her laptop with her, takes our blood pressure, puts it all into the system. The doctor comes in, looks at some of it, takes all of his notes on the rest of that. And of course, in my case, they turn out and they print it out and give me a piece of paper at the end of the appointment. But what the problem is, that's digitization, turning measurements, observations, comments into digital data. And it is step one in this journey. Totally agree with Tim and John about it being a journey, and it's a journey probably without an end destination. We'll be working on this the last day, or maybe the next to last day of the oil industry, right? So I agree with that. But what we haven't done is the integration. To Tim's point about the definition of being not only having digital data, but making use of it, changing the way we work because of it, doing data-driven analytics instead of just human observation or experience. That's the digitalization that this is still a work in progress. So we made a lot of progress towards making data digital. That's good. But we haven't then kind of tackled how they go together for workflows, how they go together to better data-driven analytics, how they give us opportunities to change the way we work.
Yeah, I would just jump in here and say that all of us know that this is not something new. This digitization idea of turning things into electronic records, or the electronification, you might say, of information or data, that's not new. We've been doing this for years. Our entire careers have been doing this, and we've never totally succeeded in getting there.
I guess it's our fault, right? We found the enemy.
Yeah, it's our fault. But it's the management and integration of all this stuff that, we've got all this digital data now. So what do we do with it? And that gets us back to this data management problem we've been talking about all this time here.
So when you think about this too, I really like the comparison you made, Jim, with healthcare, right? And obviously that was a big push that came, like you said, from laws and regulations, and so then there was actually some government funding to support that change. I guess the question would be, what would support, or what is going, or what should support that change in our industry to a digitalization approach, and and what's in it for those folks who have the money to do so?
Well, let me just throw out one thing here, because there's probably a lot of answers to that particular question. But one of the things that's kept the medical care industry from really moving forward with something obviously very important, which is individual privacy. Who do I want to see information about me? Well, I mean, I want my doctor to see. I want the blood taking people to be able to give the information so the doctor can see. I want all my doctors to see that kind of thing. But I don't particularly want some drug manufacturer to know about it, so I get bombarded with the latest prescription of their fancy new drug. I think the problem in the oil and gas industry, we kind of face the same thing around intellectual property, that we like to think data is proprietary rather than collaborative. We spent money as company A to acquire this data, and I don't want to give it away for free unless I get something back. So we do have a mindset of holding on to this data closely. And with that, it kind of then goes in, well, why should I make it to a standard quality? Why should I make it, interoperable? Why should I make it, open source with regard to that if I don't really want to share in the first place, right? So there is that pushback about should data be open, to the democratization. Let's throw another word in there, another D word, democratization of data. That it really isn't the value of the data is having it; it's the value is in using it. And if I had 10 shale wells and I could work on those to get a better completion design, well, that's one thing, and that's good. But if I had 1,000 wells and I could do that, and for my the whole community, and my other industry competitors threw their data in the pot, and then I could do an even better job and produce more oil for less, kind of cost. So the value is in the use of it. The real value is in the use of it. But we sometimes have a hesitancy in sharing, and I think that's one of the boundaries. I mean, no one's making us. We don't have, the United Nations saying oil and gas data should be all the same. So it is a voluntary effort that we have to do, and there is a cost to doing it. It's not free, and so there's a lot of areas. So I think the question of a lot of companies is, okay, I get it, I at a high level, but what's in it for me?
I think, unfortunately, and I hate to bring this up, but I think some people perceive this as a way to do things faster, better, quicker in electronic form. And unfortunately, that sometimes means less people. And so we're trying to do things faster, more efficient with less people. That doesn't bode well for us. And so you get into this sort of argument among yourselves about should I do the digital approach? Should I stay in a paper-based world? I'm using this kind of endpoints here. Should I do something else? But I think kind of as the world goes right now, that most companies, even certainly beyond oil and gas perhaps, are seeing the benefits procedurally, process-oriented, organizationally, of doing things in the electronic digital world than they are with an old way of doing it. And that's always a tough nut to crack sometimes, because it does cost money to make money here.
The word I hear over and over again is automate.
Automate.
It's more for less, more for less. And I mean, that's kind of I think that's where oil and gas is. The double shocks of the commodity prices declines in the last decade have just beaten that into everybody. I have to do more with less or the same amount of people. And so therefore we're taking and I can automate with technology. I can automate with analytics. I can automate with robots. And we're driven to that. And maybe, again, some of the snake oil salesmen in technology have said, don't worry about data quality. Don't worry about standards. My algorithm can take care of that. And so we've fallen into that trap.
Let me bring us back again to some of these other terms, you don't mind, guys. I know one of the things we hear thrown around a lot is data engineering. And what's the difference between data engineering and digital engineering? So I see if you agree with me about this. I think data engineering is really more of an architectural kind of process. It's more IT oriented. It's kind of the process of making the data flow across the organization. Building a system to capture, collect, store, manage data across the system. Whereas digital engineering is more engineering, a more traditional engineering approach of using data and tools to make better engineering decisions. Is that the way you guys see it?
That's a tough one, isn't it, guys?
Yeah. They're terms that are used every day, data engineering and digital engineering. And there's some difference between them, and it's hard to see it sometimes.
Tim, I agree with your definitions. I'm not sure that in common conversation that's consistently used that way.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Okay. Especially on the side of data engineering. That very much should be an architectural concept, but it's confused all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem we're faced here is that different companies, they hear these words at conferences and they see them in the literature and they don't really understand the difference between them. And we haven't done a good job as an industry of trying to distinguish what we mean here across the board. And in just our vernacular, the three of us use these terms all the time because we sort of understand them. But a lot of folks, and particularly people coming up in the industry is maybe younger who haven't been exposed to this in a formal way, don't always understand the distinctions that are being made. And I see this with my colleagues all the time, and they sort of conflating the meanings of these different terms as they work.
No, and I'll throw my vote with you guys as well. And I'm just as guilty in mixing up the terms with regard to that, I think. But the consequence of us doing that, to me, there's two things. One is people see in companies, see in consultancy, they said, well, it's digital. That means it belongs to the IT department. So through everything under the IT department in regard to that, even so, chief data officer reports to the chief information officer. Well, there are parts of it that belong in IT. The infrastructure belongs in IT. There's an architectural issue that, as you said, about how to move data along and the storage mechanisms, et cetera, that belongs to IT. But what often is the missing piece of the puzzle is something that is the data engineering that you talked about. It is understanding not only what a piece of data is about and all of the metadata, et cetera, what is the context of that data? What does trusted, really look like with regard to these things? And it also gets into the modeling. The IT guys may say, this is the data storage device or the data lake or whatever we're going to use. Fine, you pick the computing environment. But I want a data engineer to be able to describe how the data is stored. And whether that's a taxonomy, traditionally we've done that, whether there's metadata catalogs that, connect systems of systems and integrate around, or maybe this kind of new evolving area where it isn't just data at rest, it's data in motion, that we need to understand relationships, the semantics of the data. And now you get into ontologies used to base model, things like that. That is a discipline in itself. It is from our traditional use of all this. And therefore, it's one that, we gets confused. We leave out. When I talk to my graduate petroleum engineers, I say that you own the data. It's a business asset, not IT. It's kind of shocked. I said, well, I expect the IT department to take it from me. And so just make it easy. And all I want is a link or a browser or something like that. I said, no, you have to understand the data you're using to build that model in your sophisticated machine learning algorithm, or else, garbage in, garbage out.
Jim, I think you probably hit the nail on the head with probably the biggest issue we have with data management in general, and that's the expectation especially on what I call the end user side, that somebody else is taking care of it, that it's not really their responsibility. When in fact, they're the only ones that are really going to know when something is of high quality or not. They have the deepest knowledge and understanding of the data that they're using. They have to be involved, if not responsible, for an awful lot of that data quality and the management of the data. And I think, pushing that off into an IT organization has been and is a huge mistake.
So let me give you an example of what I see every day. I see the engineering organization is that my engineering colleagues, they're civil, mechanical, petroleum. They're building things. That's what engineers do, and what they think this is using data to help them build things better. And they will always throw up the idea of the digital oil well or the digital twins, where you in a manufacturing setting, you're using data to build a better mousetrap, you might say. That's what they think in some circles that digital engineering is. And I think that's not what we as data people, you might say, think of it as being. And there's this disconnect between the language we speak.
Yeah.
So with that, one of the things that I hear come up a lot, when we start talking about these types of roles or these activities around, data engineering, is the whole idea where companies are talking about you becoming more data centric or going through a digital transformation, right? And so they like to throw in the, hey, I need data engineers because we're going through this digital transformation, right? That's they throw that term out there. I'd like to kind of take a turn and get your guys' thoughts on what does it mean when we say digital transformation? Is it really different from what we've already described as digitalization? Is there a difference, and if so, what are the differences there?
Yeah, but I think Tim sort of hit that, in the beginning very well, in terms of the fact that, it's one thing to convert a lot of the information we have from paper-based or from analog into electronic and digital form. That's the digitization. But now I got it there. How do I transform my business, my process, to take advantage of it? That's the transformation. That's the digital transformation that we're really talking about. And I think Tim hit that early on, is how does this affect and how does our business change or improve to take advantage of the fact that we now have this data in digital form?
No, I agree. I mean, in a sense, the first generation of the digital oil field was essentially this big A to D converter, right? And
Yep.
you take all the data that you originally had, on paper, in folders, however it was, or even new data that we've now put sensors all over the oil field, and the A to D converter is, sits in the sensor or in the SCADA system. But that's only a part of the journey. And if you stop there, you haven't really seen the value that Tim described at the very beginning. Digital transformation is the emphasis should be on transformation, changing the way we work because we have this data, because we have a better, deeper insight, because we built predictive models, because we've gone physics plus statistics plus data-driven machine learning sort of models. It's not give up physics. It's not a forget Arp's equation, decline curve, which is a statistical process. It is adding all of these things together to change the way we work, to make a better decision. And that's to me the small d, big T part of the digital transformation, which Tim described well, in his digitalization, kind of definition. It's what you do with it once you are digital.
Exactly.
Yeah, Jim, yeah. I like the term you've used often in your writing is being a digital journey, a journey to change, I guess, how you would categorize that. And that really comes from the top down in an organizational sense. The organization has to change to leverage the value of data it sees, or that it creates. And that is all, that's unique to every company, obviously, how they do that. But making more money with data is what that is all about. It's a journey to get there. And there's all these things in between.
So then how about, so if we
Matt.
then, so what I was going to say was if we then take that description, and I like that digital journey, right? That's a really good way of describing it. But now if we circle that back to terms like data management, and how does it relate to data management, and particularly in the age of what we call, right, big data, are things like, software as a service, cloud services, master data management, data lakes, and all that kind of stuff related to what we're talking about here. John, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think we've taken a stab at this. I mean, to go back to use, I think a term we've all agreed on is that's the data engineer. I mean, you're really talking in those cases about, okay, what's the best methodology? What process should we be using to provide the best service we can to the end user, to the business? And how they're going to use this. How should we structure this? Where should we put it? How do they need to access it? That's a part of the architecture, and it's key. But that's not necessarily the end process. And the fact that it's already in these data forms or in these locations doesn't mean that you've got quality data, which takes us back to the whole data management. I mean, we've talked about this before. Just because we've converted something into digits doesn't improve the quality of it. There's no magic bullet that if it was bad information, we converted it from analog to digital, doesn't make it suddenly good.
Yeah.
Right.
Great point.
There's three kinds of data. There's good data, there's bad data, and our biggest headache that I believe we have is missing data. Yeah. Right. And all three of those can be put into a relational database and understand the rows and columns. And just because there's nothing in it, the IT guys say, fine, I can run I can do my performance analytics. And see how that it's giving you the whatever answer you have quickly. But the answer is you don't have the data, or the data is poor. And so again, from this IT architecture side there, and you need to have an architecture for your computing systems and how everything runs and all of the LANs, WANs, external portals, all the rest of that, without a doubt. But very few companies have a data architecture that really describes the data in all of the ways that it needs to be described, with metadata, master data standards, the inherent connection. Everything doesn't have to be connected to everything. That's bad architecture. Just put an API between this and that. That's not architecture. Architecture is this understanding of how data is used, what data really means, and how to find the best data you have. It'll never be 100% perfect. So how do you get along with what you have? How do you enrich the data with things that can move in? That's a real data architecture, and that is a goal that of our journey that very few of us are really involved in. We're still back in the A to D world. We're still back into the, as John said, just because you digitize it doesn't mean it's right. And often it's not. And so we're still struggling with that troubleshooting. We're still struggling with forensics, if you will, of where do you find data because somebody stuffed it in a personal folder on an Excel spreadsheet. But that's the data you really need. We're still struggling with those challenges. But the goal, I mean, the one day we'll wake up in heaven goal is when we have a data architecture that really addresses all these things. Having a technical architecture that enables it is great, but it's not all we need.
Isn't that why we're here with PPDM, is to construct a model to help facilitate that, to help describe a process, to help sort of make a more common understanding of how data should be represented in our industry. That seems to be that's sort of our reason for existing here.
Yeah.
Well, I like what you said with the common understanding, right? One of the things I keep hearing you guys, say, and as you're going through all of these terms, the thing that keeps popping back in my head when we, think about data management is the idea of how do we govern this? How do we provide a clear path forward? And I like, I like exactly what you said, Tim. That common understanding, right? If you set a foundation, and then that way you can always refer back to that. That can then drive the standards, Jim, like you said, and it can drive the process and approach, John, that you mentioned about earlier. It goes through, it helps you to work through the people and the process and the technology issues from start to finish. And it gives you a working model. It's something that PPDM does a very good job of. It's a working model that you can take and you can tweak and customize as you need to fit your business needs. Guys, this has been once again great set of topics, great set of conversation. I know we're getting kind of close to time here, so I any last pressing thoughts? Anything any ahas that you wanted to point out before we wrap this up today?
The only thing I'd like to add is, we talked about it, and Jim brought this up, that there's an expectation as we move into this process, there's a reduction of people. And I take a little different stance on that. It's not really, it's a reduction of people in certain roles. But the fact is, every time we do any kind of an automation, new roles creep up.
True. Absolutely.
I mean, the data scientists, the data analysts, I mean, these roles have come out of the whole digitalization of the process. I mean, they didn't exist before. So as we move, new roles show up. And I think one of the ones that we talked about here is the role of that data manager, and what do they really look like in the future?
Yeah, John, I think that is the digital transformation we're talking about here. Is We're transforming the business in those ways. We're creating new jobs that we didn't have before to do different kinds of work. And that's exactly, I think, the point about this digital journey idea that we're on here.
Just for me, and I like to quote historical figures, but the Wallace Pratt, who was one of the co-founders of the AAPG back, I don't know, 100 years ago or something close to it, he said oil is first found in the minds of men. Of course, it's really first found in the minds of men and women. He forgot, one half of the women. It was the culture of the time. I ran into another quote that talked about, we're never going to run out of oil, but we will stop. The industry will end when we stop running out of ideas on how to find oil. I think one of the things we want to try to say here is, as we now have the opportunity, because of digitization, of having an awful lot of digital data, and we have computer facilities that are able to crunch big models, et cetera. But we need to recognize that the quality of data, the importance of data management, the opportunity of a data architecture, essentially is a really important part in our continuing to have good ideas and to keep this industry adding value.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Exactly. No, that's a great way to cap this conversation. Well said, Jim. Well said. Well, guys, once again, thank you very much. As always, it's great to just sit back and listen to what you guys have to say and the experience and the perspective you bring. Hopefully, by doing this, we've been able to, maybe provide some closure, but at least maybe can get people to our listeners to think a bit more and maybe not be so confused about what it means around data management, why it's so important, why these terms matter. So hopefully this is something that people can take and continue to use in their discussions within their companies and their own organizations. What I'd like to say is, again, thank you to you guys and to our listeners. thank you so much for being with us. This is a number 6 podcast, and is now done, and we just thank you for those of you that have been listening and sticking with us from the very first one. If you haven't heard any of our podcasts, if this is your first one, listening to, thank you for being here. We'd love to have you go back, listen to our other podcasts. You can see all of those podcasts and where to access them on ppdm.org. You can also then find out more about the PPDM model and some of these roles that we've talked about also at ppdm.org. I also want to encourage you, our listeners, let us know what your thoughts, your feedback, what you'd like us to be talking about. We've actually got a number of future podcasts planned where we're going to be looking at possible roles of titles of data management. We've got some guest speakers that we're going to be bringing into the mix. So stay tuned. More is coming, and we definitely want to get your thoughts and your feedback. Let us know. Comment, on LinkedIn. Send us notes to ppdm.org. Let us know what you want us to talk about, and we will get those in the queue. Again, hey guys, thank you very much for your time. And as always, you guys have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks.